My logic be family up for Stella. I guess I didn't get the memo. Minimum say in the bank, you sign it emo. You always want to make me feel like me demo. Me share once I'm recording my first demo. 2007, I'm a falling my work I would dream. And you think you're swinging down, it's like a
physical money and put me to wrap to say. For me, send Yama with in a minute in Sabacandia and then one Taptap Send.
Yeah, Ebushan for we didn't did an Akuma Pachua one. They recommended Taptap Send that mama. And that's our for also for baby. Diabasa, our rating so yeah. Our year A1 into piano do Taptap Send. That also is a Taptap.
You won't do what Shrek a man son. You won't do what Gala for say. You walk on to near this coffee here. May and friend for the VR, you will tap at the move. Taptap Send in this street.
A tap with the one.
Tap and one in a
Piao.
Yo, I was for me, Mama Jomamo, Aquaba, and Enumere, Ebiemo, and so at the more about Jumedia to in September, Taptap Send every Thursday, Bia, ya day, a bro, and then so Yamia, don't what ye a shemwa. Na a Juma Bakupe and a Yasaf and Enina, Yedihu and Comosabri. Miss Rewa said, Wabaswa Bomodiana share the link with a brother or a sister, na also intimate and joining and then you marry a Jumedi. So it's answered the topic that we want to discuss this evening is a topic beer entire and within our African community. Need to yen Ghana community mu now so idea beer here topic be here pass a brainy no yetimi edi ho enkomo and inti misre wa frɛ obi na ɔno nso mfrɛ obi na wo meka ye ho enanwumre ewo dwumadie so na ene ye twetwe enkomo about autism enokra eno ene dien ene nyame aka ye ho aboa yensa aka eye Dr. Akosua sa topic yi edana koma so pa ene nti enanwumre ye ne Dr. Akosua ebetwetwe enkomo about autism ene nti frɛ obi na wono nso mfrɛ obi na wo meka ye ho ene anwumre ewo dwumadie so yo na ansa na no me de aseda kese pa ebema me sponsors me ka na me ka Taptap Send womo enikita mimu ema mitimi edi dwumadie ebrɛw it is me kanfo tap dia na me srewa if you are on this call or you are listening to me watching me wherever that you are around the globe na wo me kan tap abusuakuo ni ho dia na me kanfo tap edi ama bomodin akọ App Store Play Store na download the tap na wonso bomodin ebeka abusuakuo kese no ezanse enye just sending money to Ghana and a tap eboa ema utimi eye. Mima, a very typical example today. What happened to me? I am going to a program in somewhere in Europe. And minim se me de ho ennyoma nyina koma adwuma ama yatua ama me intermediate matoma adwemu sika ne yatua but due to bank delays ni adinti no na omo ese omo nsaka sika no omo nsa enkan e na omo frɛ me se yensa anka sika no enne ya de a ene you lose your spot and I'm say ade na ma confirm me se me ba ma ye bibia aka se me way fees no mo nsa beka na ade nti na and I'm say there be e ho happen na me fa me Taptap Send app no me call app no so no and I me transfer fee na say me tiama company no me transfer sika from my bank account into my Europe wallet. Say Taptap at the Europe wallet account. First na your Ghana CD wallet. Any issue with Bank of Ghana. We are working on it very soon. We will launch the Ghana CD wallet. And I the UK Europe wallet buy. Internet just say, oh, UK, you only have access to UK wallet. And our Europe, so you only have access to Europe wallet. And UK, you can create Europe wallet, Euro wallet, Missy Europe, Euro wallet. Ewo tap app on also. Into the American say, into company Europe. And I'm sending Zika from my bank account into my Euro wallet. And after the may transfer from my tap Euro wallet into their bank account. Within a minute, no more and they confirm my place. And it is a community tap. What am I going to do? After na me call my bank app so na ma call transfer Zika from my bank. And mind you, when you are doing international transfer from your bank account and your instant, it will take some days before it will reflect in the beneficiary's account. But with tap instant. Umpewe na upedie. And it's na make for tap amount. And ye Euro wallet in kwa and or dia babe kan. Nemum sabra minoka saying so dear tap ede a year tap Visa card and so aba. And into Bomodia say wonsa enkan be e tap app ni mu a call App Store me say call App Store. Call tap app no so na create your tap wallet. Start using your wallet, you will say tap Visa card now will pop up in your app. When it pop up in your app, you can have access to either a physical card or you can use the virtual card. Why do you need tap Send Visa card whilst you have a lot of bank accounts? You need it. It's a tap Visa card now. When you go on anywhere in the world, now we use to withdraw money. Tap will not charge you. It will be the same good rates now. Unya or tap app on us. It will be just like you are transferring money, but we are giving you bank card for you to be able to make withdrawals wherever that you are in the world. And it won't pay way a day beam na main country and sana wa beka tap abusu ekwe Bomodia. Download Taptap Send today, and you definitely enjoy using Taptap Send to send money, spend money, make payment, cross-border payment, wherever that you are around the globe. Taptap Send was a papa, no. Mamemfa and Kratobaku Inkem. Right after that, me guest speaker, Ebebro. We are talking about autism. I'll be
Medidi ya nyantechwa emre bia mdisika be free Europe akoma ebusuafo wo Ghana no me use tap send no fee mobile money transfer eye easy eye convenient eye fast and sound so ye free wontua hwe me discover ye mapim tap send entienne also download the tap send app no ewo mobile phone so free na fesika komo ebusuafo wo Ghana afa na nyina tap send papa no
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the program. Hi, what's Minka? Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you also hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay, Dr. Akosua can hear me. Can everybody hear me? Yes, okay. Dr. Akosua, you are looking very good.
Thank you. With this hot weather, you have to try.
Made us send your friend on a short notice na eja ebusuafo agitu mu no mo boa ame ahwe baby no na utimi ene eba betwetwe nkomo ewo subject it seems like a taboo in our community. People don't really talk about it, but it is something that is going on in our community that we need to know, learn about it. We sometimes we don't even understand. When you talk about autism, we don't understand. We don't understand, and we don't even know the early indicators. You bet me edia boasa kolebi will be a quiet befaso ebefaso. Sometimes crying yenim so will be a yenim say in so be back. Or yaba be wono. Dr. Host, Mr. So sa topic yi mumaye na mente ase when it comes to autism and only there what are some of the early indicators I be who say akwalai will be common signs realistic time for diagnosis and why awareness matters.
Okay,
take over, Dr.
Okay, me that's very me that's Nana Kwame and Taptap Send team, any UT media team, so for inviting me back onto the show. Yeah, it's been a while. I used to be frequent on the show, but yeah, as he said, there's been a lot of things going on in the background. But I am on the health talk every Wednesday. You learn more about some of these things. But for the purposes of today, I'm going to talk about autism, especially within the African communities and in African children. So, well, why is it important? For my goal today is for us to understand what autism is, to recognize the early signs and symptoms of autism, to know how to access support in the UK, because I practice in the UK. If you're elsewhere, and I know that there are other people in other parts of the world from here, I know there are Europe, USA, other parts. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. I might know because we do read around it. But if I don't know, I can always signpost you to somebody who might be able to help, or I might do some research and get back to you. Okay. So feel free to ask any questions regardless of where you are, but I will be sort of concentrating on the access and the support in the UK today. And then my final thing I'm going to do, which a lot of people don't tend to like, is to challenge common myths in our communities, almost sort of myth busting to say with regards to what autism is. So let's dive right into what is autism. Well, essentially, a lot of people will say it's a disease or it's a condition, but I suppose it is. But it's a condition, and it's a neurodevelopmental difference. And what that means is that it's essentially there are some people whose brains are just wired differently. Okay, we can't all be the same. So some people's brains develop differently. And this can affect how people communicate, how people interact with each other, or even how people experience the world. You might say, I'm sitting next to my brother Kwame, and we're both going on this journey together, and we're experiencing the world in the same way, but you couldn't be more wrong. Even though you share a very similar experience with somebody, you could experience that same experience in a very, very different way. And I'll come to that in a little bit later on. So that's why we often say that autism is on a spectrum. And what that means is that it's not just as simple as, autism, it is A or it is B. We have A, B, C, D, E to Z. It's a spectrum. It's very large. And there can be people on a very high end of the spectrum, and there can be people on the very low end of the spectrum. So just because we say somebody has autism doesn't mean that they will all be the same, or they will all present the same, or they will all act the same. Again, I'll go into more of this just as an introduction to what autism is. Okay. Some children may need a lot of support. Others may be very independent, don't need any support at all. But it's just good to know that they've got autism, so that if they do behave differently to what the society deems as normal, we don't almost judge them to say, oh, they're a bit odd. It's just because they have got autism and they're behaving in the way in which they experience the world. Okay. The one thing I'm going to drum on today, and it will be very important because I'm speaking to a mainly African community, is that autism is not caused by bad parenting. I want people to understand that. And yes, we're a bad parent. If your child has autism, it's got nothing to do with you as the parent. It's not a curse or a spiritual attack, and it's not something that a child will grow out of. It's not behavioral. It's not, oh, this child is stubborn and they will eventually grow out of it. No, it's not something like that. It is a lifelong condition, but with the right support, children can thrive, and people can thrive still having autism. Okay. So that's just a little bit about what autism is. Now, what are the signs to look for? And again, I'm going to give some UK focused examples. Actually, I'll say that's not even the right thing to say because autism is quite global, but I guess again, you come to understand what I mean by UK focused. So essentially, there are some of these signs I'm going to talk about appear before the age of 5. Okay, so communication differences. Now, a lot of the time, African children who speak their language at home will be flagged as having delayed speech. This is quite common, not even just in African children. Any community of children who are bilingual, who basically learn another language. So English is not their first language. Polish people, Indian people, Ukrainian, whatever. If you're learning another language alongside English, a lot of the time, and when it comes to the English, they would say you have delayed speech. This is different from having autism. Okay, and again, I'll come to explain that further on. But sometimes people with autism can present with delayed speech as a sign. More telling will be no speech at all. Some of them don't talk at all. So by the age of 5, child has very little words or not speaking at all. This can be a sign of autism. Repeating words, so echolalia, not having their own words, not saying their own things, but if you talk, they might pick a word and start repeating it. That can be a sign. And these are the communication examples I'm given. So there are 4, or was it 5? 4 different sectors I'll give. So these are communication examples, okay? Difficulty understanding instructions, again, at a certain age. For example, my 3-year-old, if I say braha, he's able to come. If I say kofawe bre mami, he's able to follow the instructions and do what I say he should do. If your child is around that age and cannot follow simple instructions, I'm not talking about kofawe, we are not, like, it's not a long bit of instruction. It's just something very simple, like bra, snase, ko, famame, fatoho, that sort of thing. Very, very simple instruction. They've got difficulty understanding it. That can be a telling sign sometimes. And then not responding to their name. That can also be a communication sign that, so these are some of the signs in communication. When it comes to social interaction, which is also a big one. So limited eye contact. There are some people who are shy, fair enough. But if a child is less than 5 and they've got limited eye contact, regardless of who's speaking to them, mom, dad, the person that they're closest to, nan, whoever it is, limited eye contact is a big one. They prefer to play alone. So there are stages where children play alone, but they not with each other. So we call something parallel play. And that's when, again, this happens around the toddler age of sort of 2.5 to 3 and above years old until they hit sort of 4. When they're 4 years old, they start playing with each other. But when they're 3, they play parallel. So what they do is stand next to each other and play. They play independently of each other, but they're still next to each other. Now, you can have children who don't like being next to anybody at all. They just like to isolate themselves and they like to go sit somewhere and play by themselves. So they have difficulty making friends at school, nursery, or wherever you go to church, Sunday school, Sunday mosque, Friday mosque, I don't know. But whatever social interaction, they just find it difficult to make that connection. And they don't seem to have an interest in anything. That could be a social interaction signs that you have to look out for. Now we have behavior and sensory differences. So again, repetitive behavior. So if they have like a block of toys and that's the only thing they like to play with, but they're very specific about it. So green has to go after red, red then has to come after blue, and then blue goes after yellow. And if you put yellow before blue, it's a big problem, because it has to be green, red, yellow, blue. That's the sequence in their head. That can be a telling sign because they're very particular. That's called repetitive behavior. Some people exhibit hand flapping or some hand gestures as well, and that can be repetitive as well. I'm going to make a disclaimer. If your child exhibits one of these things that I'm saying and is isolated, it's very unlikely that, that they've got autism. But I'm saying that these are some of the signs that we look out for. Obviously, we don't look out for one thing, because if they've got autism, they won't just show one thing. It'll probably show us several things in these several little areas. Again, I'll come to that in a minute. So noise sensitivity is another one. If there's loud noise and they tend to close their ears. They tend to go away from the noise. They just don't want to be around any of the noise. They've got very funny feeling with textures and food. So if they don't like particular feeling of textures, or they're very picky with food, that can be something. And then they've got something like unusual playing. So for a 3-year-old, spinning a wheel instead of playing with like the car, just spinning only the wheel and only doing that, or never play with the car, only spin the wheel, things like that. So that can be like unusual playing for toddlers at that age. The important thing to note in African families is some behaviors can sometimes be dismissed as, oh, they're just stubborn. So again, if you think about this, if you're telling Kweku, oh, Kweku tenase, and Kweku's not sitting down, and you say Kweku Fabra and Kweku's not bringing whatever it is you're asking him, we can say, oh, he's just stubborn. And dismiss it, instead of sort of finding out, could this be an issue, or is it true that, maybe they're just not listening? It could be an option, but we need to find out before we rule it out. Okay. Some people might say things like, oh, boys talk late. I've had that before. Somebody said, when my son he wasn't walking at the time that I wanted him to walk. He wasn't even delayed, but it was just I expected him to walk early, because apparently my sister and I walked really early. So I was like, oh, he runs in the family. He should really be walking by now. He was like 10 months, by the way. And I remember we met somebody at the shop, and they said, oh, he's got all his teeth. And he was like, oh, almost so basically it's like we have some of these sayings that we say, and it's one of these things like, oh, in Beman Kasantem. And it's like we just brush it under the carpet. That's all. As a typical boy, boys don't talk. Or sometimes, oh, they will grow out of it. Uncle Sam grew out of it, so Amina will also grow out of it. These are some of the things that we brush under the carpets. But early support is key when it comes to diagnosing autism. So being able to recognize some of these signs, and then go into your healthcare professional, so either your GP or a pediatrician, to make an assessment. Because what happens is, just because they have these signs does not mean that they definitely have autism, but it'll be more detrimental to miss autism. Nothing wrong with saying, I've noticed these things. Can you please have a look? They'll have a look, and if it's not autism, it'll be like, it's just not autism, it's just developmental delay, or like you said, maybe they're just a late talker, or maybe they're just shy, and a pediatrician would be able to do that for you. But if you don't make note of it and take it forward, and essentially if it's not diagnosed early, then it can cause more problems in the future. So it's very important to be vigilant when it comes to looking after children. Now, the fourth thing I'm going to talk about before the getting help is basically our cultural beliefs and barriers in the African community. So I've already kind of touched on this, but a lot of the time we like to attribute things to things like, oh, it's a spiritual attack. Oh, it's a family disease. Everybody in this family talked really late. Oh, yeah, family and penipa. They be an yeah, we're like that. We don't like people. Or sometimes we just simply ignore it, like say, oh, they grow out of it, and we just leave them. And then, even when they are older and they're exhibiting some symptoms, we just say, oh, on the so and we almost just ignore fully all the signs and symptoms might be there, but we just refuse to see it, because oftentimes our cultural beliefs make us feel that autism is not a black people disease. Oh, it's not an Africa way in Brofo. Maybe say before don't get sick like that. It's not a condition. So that's some of the things that we say. Why is this a concern to us as healthcare professionals? Because it leads to delayed diagnosis. And as I've already touched on, delayed diagnosis just means that your child is not getting the support and the help that they need. It also sometimes can bring shame and stigma, because a lot of the time, if children are exhibiting some of these symptoms, people might just say, oh, it's a spiritual attack, or and it's a stigma that goes with it. And some families just try to avoid be trying to avoid support services or something like that, especially here in the UK, where we feel like every little thing would be like, oh, it's neglect or something, so we don't want to even touch on it. So So for that reason, in the UK, we definitely know that African children are diagnosed later, much, much later than other people when it comes to diagnosis of autism. Sometimes they're much, much older. And when I did this talk on the health talk on Wednesday, there was a lady who came forward to say she was diagnosed with autism only around like her 40s. And she said the suffering that she went through, even whenever she'd go back home to holidays in Ghana, the kind of almost insults and the experiences that she had, name calling, just because people might have seen her as a bit odd. And then she was finally diagnosed with autism, and she knew, okay, maybe this is why I act the way I act. But this was when she was in her 40s. This woman had such a bad experience of how Ghana was. She sworn never to go back. Her kids will never go back, just because of the way she was treated from when she was a younger person because of her condition, which is quite sad actually, if you think about it. So as I say, some of these behaviors may be misinterpreted as being behavioral issues rather than developmental differences. So we need to shift from blame to understanding. We need to stop being silent. We need to start supporting each other when it comes to autism, and we need to stop the shame and advocate for people who've got autism and actually say, you know what, this is not anything to be shameful of. Actually, you've got a condition and this is how we can support you. Okay, so coming on to support, and this is where it's going to be heavily based on the UK. Essentially, getting support in the UK, it's pretty simple. Depending on the age of the child, you can speak to a GP, which is general practitioner. Everybody should be registered to a GP if you live in the UK, not even just for these purposes, but just for anything. A GP is your best bet. If the child is a little bit younger, you can speak to your health visitor, because again, from my experience, I know that up until maybe the age of 5 or 6, you've literally got health visitor in every community. You can just walk into a health center, or they've usually got their numbers that they usually give you on their red books and things. If you notice any behaviors that you're concerned about, just talk to the health visitor. They might be able to take you through it. Ones that people really underuse, nursery and school teachers when it comes to health. They spend a lot of the time with your children, especially if you're a working mom like myself. My son basically does nursery Monday to Friday until I pick him up after work. So if you think about the bulk of his day when he's playing, he's with his nursery teachers, there are some things I might notice that his nursery teachers and school teachers will notice. And they might come to you and say to you, we've noticed this about Kojo. What's he like at home? Sometimes it might just prompt you to start looking a bit further. Or likewise, if you see just one time your child maybe flapping his fingers or flapping her fingers or playing with blocks in a weird way, you can just say to the teacher, I've noticed that Adwa was playing with these blocks in a weird way yesterday. Has she been showing any signs of weird play recently? And you can ask the teachers to watch for you. I know that a lot of the time within the African communities, we can be very busy working several shifts, night shifts, 2 or 3 shifts, we're hustling. Nothing wrong with hustling. And sometimes we might not have we might not be able to look out for some of these things. And again, I'll come to this in a minute, because I am going to say we do need to make time to look at to be there for our children, to be there for our family, and to notice some of these things. But it's not everything that you will notice. Okay, that's why they say a village brings up a child. So we really do underutilize our nursery and school teachers, who do an amazing job. And if you're really concerned, you can always ask them. But essentially, the person that you're going to get help from would be either your doctor or your health visitor in terms of medical way. The referral for assessment is usually quite simple. The NHS would, if you go to the GP, they'd basically be referred to the pediatrics team. If it goes through the teachers, the school can also do a referral for these things, autism and things like that. Again, it'll be referred to pediatrics straight on, so it doesn't even go through the GP, even though the GP might get a letter to say, this is what we're doing. But essentially, all of it will go straight to pediatrics, and there's the NHS developmental pediatrics team or the child developmental team that will look after this. Once the child has been diagnosed, they will be assessed by a pediatrician. It might take a few months. What they might do is they might talk about, they might get you to see them in clinic, and then they might bring you to a playgroup area, and they have several assessments that they do. If they are concerned, or if they feel like your child is identified to have one of these problems. So if a speech delay, isolated speech delay, they might just send them to speech and language therapy. Okay. Sometimes, like I said, in bilingual children, oftentimes they will be sent to speech and language therapy, but they'll often be discharged from it because the specialist in speech and language will say, this child is bilingual, they speak fine in their mother's tongue. So essentially, they don't have a speech delay. They just have a language problem when it comes to English, but they will catch up. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay. But if it's connected to autism and they've got autism and they've got a speech delay, then they'll be sent to speech and language therapists, and then speech and language therapists will work with them to try and improve their language. They might be sent to occupational therapy to help with the social aspect of things. And then they might get an EHCP, which is an educational care plan. So any nursery or any school that they go to, they've got the care plan there to say this person has got autism. These are their care needs. They've got either really high-end autism and they don't really need any support. They're very independent. Just that you need to be mindful that they don't like to socialize, so don't force them to play with other kids and things like that. So it basically just gives you information on what the child has, what their needs are, and how to care for them, essentially. The important tips here is to trust your instincts as a parent, okay? If you feel that your child is acting oddly, like I said, it doesn't have to take 5 times for you to see it. If you see it once and you think this is out of the ordinary, speak to somebody who spends more time with your child, whether it be the teacher, whether it be their grandmother, or whoever's looking after them, their carer. Just have a chat with them, say, actually, I noticed this. Have you noticed it as well? Maybe we should keep a diary and see, if it's a consistent thing. Document all concerns. As I said, keep diaries. If you've seen it once and you think it's not bad enough that I want to go to somebody to talk about, but I'm going to keep an eye on this. And if you're able to, then keep a diary. Maybe every Friday, Kojo likes to flap his hands at 2:00. Is that a thing? Is that something I'm supposed to be concerned about? Or every morning before Kojo goes to school, he likes to count his Cheerios. And, is that something I'm supposed to be worried about? And then put down time, make a diary, so that when you go to see your GP, you can say, I've actually kept a diary of what he or she has been doing. And then, that makes the diagnosis a little bit easier. Be persistent. Waiting lists can be long. And if you feel that there's a problem and it's not being taken, just be persistent. Keep asking, okay, where are we? How long is the waiting list? Just be proactive when it comes to advocating for your children, and ask questions. If you don't understand anything, and absolutely nothing wrong with asking your GP. GPs, take it from me, will always try to drive you out of the room because we've only got 10 minutes to investigate whatever's going on with you, but also to write down everything that we've said in the conversation and to send off a referral. Sending off a referral alone, you know how paperwork is in this country. One referral alone for me can take at least 10 minutes. Okay. So if you come to me and I know I've already got to do an autism referral, I'm not going to lie to you, but I'm really not trying to almost hear what you have to say. I'm like, in my head, I'm like, oh, I need to do this referral and I really need to, but sometimes you just need to advocate for yourself. You need to say, hey doc, I'm really worried about this. And no doctor will drive you out of the room. No doctor will literally push you, maybe a bit frustrated at the end to say, oh, I'm running like 30 minutes late or something. But if you're worried about something, just ask. And if a doctor can give you information, they'll always say, okay, why don't you come back and we can talk about this, or I'll book you in with my colleague who knows a little bit more about that. But at least you've asked the question and there's something being done about it. Okay, so always advocate for your children. A few last things before I round off. So if your child is diagnosed with autism, how do you support them at home? Use simple and clear language. As I said, for children, depending on the age of the child. So with a toddler, you're not going to send them on wild goose chases and errands anyway. But if your child is like 8 years old and you feel like they should really be doing a little bit better in terms of their language, but they're not really understanding, speak to them like you're speaking to a toddler. Simple words. Abna fatuo. Abna fabra, nothing like, oh, abna fakwato kitchen, woo, yeah, now wako had it, no long sentences, just give them short tasks. So abna faweko kitchen. When they finish doing that, okay, abna afe braha. When they come, okay, if I wait to just break it down, okay, break it down, and essentially they'll eventually learn how to and catch up with the help of speech and language therapists. Create routines. People with autism love routines. As I said, they love to match up their colors, count up their Cheerios, things like that. So create a routine. Don't be like I go with the wind. If they wake up at 8 o'clock, they brush their teeth, they pray, they go have breakfast, keep it that way. Some of us, we like to be a bit spontaneous, but if you've got a child of autism and you like to be spontaneous, you've got to stop it because, they like their routines. Use visual support if communication becomes an issue. You can always use like cards. So, if you're trying to explain to them, go get me the tea, and they're not understanding, you can just show them a cup of tea, things like that. Be patient with communication. This is one of the things that a lot of people fail at because they get quite frustrated. You're talking to somebody that you feel should understand. You're talking to a 10-year-old and you feel like this person should understand what I'm saying, but they really don't get it, and it's not their fault, okay? So if you feel that you're talking to them and they're not understanding it, tone it down. Say, okay, I'm not talking to a 10-year-old, I'm talking to a 3-year-old. Talk to the person the way you talk to a 3-year-old. We need to be patient with communication until they get there, okay? And then reduce the sensory overload. This is a huge thing in African families. We are loud, okay? This is not even, I'm including myself. We are very loud. When families meet, when we're on the phone, when we're watching TV, we're just loud people. And kids with autism, some of them get a lot sensory overload. Even in church, I always say like, when we go to church and the sound of the bass and the guitar and it's all nice and we're screaming and oh hey baba and all that stuff, but people with sensory overload don't like that, and you find that they might start getting agitated at church, irritated at church. This is where a lot of the spiritual things come in. Oh, it's a spiritual attack, or they don't like sorry. No, they don't like the noise, and to be honest, I don't like the noise sometimes in church. I feel like it's too much. But if you notice that your child is struggling with noise, just buy them this noise cancelling headset, or sit somewhere that's not so close, or maybe you might consider having to change the environment to less, like depending on what it is. But remember that your child is a priority, okay? So if they really can't take it, you don't want to be taking them somewhere that's gonna make their condition worse, okay? For emotional support, we need to celebrate the small things that they do. So if you say fat or hot and they put it down, be like they've won a marathon. Oh my gosh, well done, clap for them. Oh, great job. Like you really need to grab them that emotional support. Avoid comparison with other children. Oh, cousin Kweku, Tamo no, or Kasabube. No, we don't do that. Okay. That's Kweku. This is Kojo. They're two different people. They don't do that. Okay. Build the child's confidence. Make them know that you're on their corner. Don't be the one against them, because if you are, they will never trust you with anything, and they can't come to you if they feel like they're being bullied in school, or if they're having a tough day at school for not being understood. They will feel like you're just the same, that you don't understand them either. But if you're there with them through it all, they can open up to you, and you trust me, you find out a lot more when they do open up to you. Now, I've talked a lot about the children, but for parents as well, having a child with autism, or even a child who might have autism, so even going through the diagnosis process is very difficult, and it can be tricky. Again, because we don't really understand what autism is, we hear it and we get really scared. For parents, seek community support. If you feel like a child is going through this and they're going through the referral processes, talk to your GP about your mental health, talk to the health visitor, seek community support. Don't keep it buried. Just don't isolate yourself. It's okay to ask for help. If you think you're struggling with it, you don't know what's going on. Honestly, that's what GPs are here for. That's what your health team is here for. Just seek support. And even if it's a pediatrician, just say, you know what, I'm really struggling with this. Can you help me? Is there a service you can signpost me to? Okay. So you'll be glad to know that I'm done, but I just want to end with saying autism is not something that we should be afraid of. It is something that we need to understand as a community. Our children are not less than, they are just different. So if your child has autism or experience any of these things, it's not that they are less than, they don't have a brain problem. It's just that their brain is wired in a different way. I don't know if any of you watch Big Bang Theory, or if you've ever heard of the character Sheldon, but he's got autism. One of the smart, and I know as much as it's fiction, but there are people out there. One of the smartest people out there was I think Isaac Einstein had it. And some of the groundbreaking scientists has autism. So just because your child's diagnosed for autism, A, doesn't mean they cannot be a great person. B, it doesn't mean that they're not intelligent. It just means that what we society class as the norm, they are different to that. But different can be good sometimes, because if Einstein was not different, he wouldn't have made some of the fantastic observations and discoveries that he made. So we need different people. So it's nothing to be scared of. There is support in the community, and we should really try to reduce stigma in the African communities, educate ourselves, support our families, and advocate for our children. So thank you for listening. Before we come to the Q&A session, we'll have a short break and then we'll come back with the question and answers. Thank you.
Medidi ya nyantechwa emre bia mdisika be free Europe akoma ebusuafo wo Ghana no me use Taptap Send. Taptap Send, no fee mobile money transfer. Eye easy, eye convenient, eye fast, and sounds so free. Tia she me discover ye mapim. Tap Send. Entienne also download the Taptap Send app no ewo mobile phone so free. Na fesika komo ebusuafo wo Ghana fa na nyina. Taptap Send. Papa no.
So thank you all for coming back. Fortunately, our usual host is not able to be here. He's had to go off, so I will be hosting myself. But after the session, you can still stay. We've got somebody will come on and talk to, I can't remember his name, but we'll come and do the Tap focus session. So that will still go ahead, but after the question and answer session. So I will be taking the question and answers. I've already got quite a few in my inbox, but please feel free to raise up your hand and I'll call you to ask your question. Feel free to speak in whatever language that you're comfortable with, whether it be Tree, Ga, French. I don't understand Ga, but I'm sure somebody would translate for me. So yeah, feel free to speak whatever language that you're comfortable with and raise up your hand, and then also you can write in the chat. Okay. So do we have any questions in the chat? I'd like to acknowledge some of the people that I usually see. So we've got John Agbe, who's always here, Auntie Liz, Cecilia Mankwa, and Josephine was here. I think she's gone now, but thank you all for coming. And I know we've got some people on YouTube as well. If you've got questions on YouTube, I am on the YouTube channel as well. So please feel free to ask in the comment section. I will answer some of the questions. So let me just quickly look. I've got some questions here on my phone. Somebody's asking, why did I decide to be an advocate for autism? So just to put it out, I'm not an advocate for autism in particular. Yes, I know I do a lot of autism talks. I run a community interest company called Safe Spaces, and it's for mental health, but in young African Black people in the UK. Is to support the youth with mental health, but also to help the family support them. And autism can sometimes come under the mental health section, because even though, like I said, it's not a mental health condition, but people diagnosed with it or families diagnosed with it can really struggle mentally. So it's one of the topics that comes under some of the things that I do. I'm quite passionate about it. I set up the mental health community interest company because when I was working in pediatrics, I found that a lot of the time there were Black families coming into A&E and with children committing suicide or attempting to commit suicide. And only at that time did their parents take it seriously. And a lot of the time when I isolate the children and I speak to them, they'll say, well, I've been having these symptoms for years. I've told my mum and dad. They always tell me I should stop acting possessed, or I should stop claiming attention, or I should just stop this bad behavior. It doesn't fit me. And, so a lot of African children felt that they couldn't speak to their parents or that there was no support at home. And it really had to get that bad for them to be wanting to take their lives before things were taken seriously. And even when they came to see us and we'd speak to the parents, you could literally tell the parents were like, oh, they're just trying to seek attention. So I decided to set up this community interest company called Safe Spaces because I felt like we need a lot of support as an African community when it comes to mental health. So that's what I do. Thank you for asking that question. So I've got another question. I'm just reading it. So I'm not going to mention the name, but I think it's anonymous. But it says, my Ghanaian husband is obsessed with buying medicines online from people he's following on TikTok or on Facebook. He claims that these medicines have helped their children. He says these medicines are for metal cleansing. Is autism linked with metal exposure? Thank you for that question, actually. So usually when I talk about autism, I do a two-part where I talk about initially this is almost a brief introduction on what autism is. And then we go into things like the causes and, treatment and all things like that. Autism, as far as I'm concerned, is not linked to metal exposure, or as far as the literature, as far as research, most up-to-date literature and research shows that it's not linked to that. Autism is genetic, is mostly genetic. So it tends to run in families. Essentially, it has, some people have mentioned that it's linked to vaccines. Again, that's been highly disproved. I have a lot of people now. People will say, "Oh, I don't give my children the MMR, or I don't get them vaccinated because autism linked to vaccines." Literally, there have been papers which have been written to disprove that. A lot of people also come out and say, "Well, then why is autism being diagnosed a lot more these days than back in the day?" That's only because we're starting to understand it a lot more now than we did. So back in the day, people might have had autism, but we wouldn't tag it or label it as autism because we didn't understand what it was. We'd probably label them or tag them as being delinquents or being badly behaved. We wouldn't say they've got autism, but now we're putting labels on it. That's why it makes it seem like it's being overdiagnosed these days. So just to simply answer your question, no, not from the most recent research. Autism, not that I know of, is not linked to metal exposure, nor is it linked to vaccines. So yeah, thank you for that question. I've got another question. Again, you guys are being really shy today. I feel free to lift up your hand, ask your question. I'm not gonna bite you, okay? Somebody's asking something about autism. I've already answered this. I'll come back to this. Auntie Liz, you have nothing to contribute? Okay, I've talked about these signs already. Right, somebody in African diaspora communities, what are some common myths about autism that you've encountered and how do you address them? Thank you for this question. So I think this is a very, very, very important question because I think I've already touched on some of this already, right? The most one that I've encountered is that autism is a spiritual curse. Again, because it tends to run in families, you will tend to see that there are patterns. And some people will say, oh, in saa opoku family no de obia bodamum or we de ne nana council bi de from Kojo the third to Kojo the second and all of them na say no what it runs but this is what I'm saying, it's a genetic link. Okay, it runs in families. So yes, you will see it in families, but it doesn't mean it's a spiritual curse. It's just because it's like saying, how when we say that, oh, diabetes runs in families, high blood pressure runs in families, stroke runs in families. So we always advise and we say, because diabetes may run in your family, when you come to see a doctor, we'll say, what's your family history? And if you had diabetes in your family, we'll then advise you and say, try to cut down on sugar. A lot of people who have diabetes running in their family, you see that every generation, they have at least one or two people who develop diabetes because it runs in families. It's the same with autism. So yes, it will run in families, but it's not a spiritual curse. It's because it's a condition and it's a way that the brain is wired differently, like I said, okay? So this is some of the things that we usually have to tackle as healthcare professionals. Another one is that it's a Western phenomenon and it doesn't happen in Africa. Again, that's a big lie because we know that it does happen in Africa. There's a lady who's been championing autism action in Ghana for years now. It's been about 5 years since I first met her on City TV, and she was talking about autism. That's when she was trying to raise awareness of it. So hopefully she's done some good job, and a lot of you might know about autism. But essentially, it's not a Western phenomenon. We experience it as well as Black people, but like I said, we often overlook it. So people where in African communities, autism is often underdiagnosed, and that's where some of the challenges come from, because we usually pin it off as being bad behavior, being spiritual attacks, and then we'll go to church to pray about it. People who have it might have stigma, so they just don't get involved in anything, and they just quite a difficult life, I think. And like I said in the beginning, if you were here, about the lady who'd had autism but had been diagnosed at the age of 40, and they'd been through hell as a child just because they were, labeled with all sorts of things. So yeah, no, it's definitely not a Western phenomenon. We have it in Africa as well. I'll take maybe my last 3 questions. I've got one here in the chat which says, how can faith-based organizations and community groups and schools partner effectively to improve awareness and support? And I love this question. That's the reason I picked it, because I think that I get called a lot to churches. And yesterday I was talking about something similar to this. I was talking about mental health in the youth on our OT Health Talk program on Wednesdays. And I was talking about how, Africans, faith is basically the bedrock of our communities, and especially in the African diaspora. Everybody has a sort of faith group, either a mosque group, a church group, whatever it is. Okay, places of worship have a huge influence on our lives. If faith leaders, places like churches and mosques, will get professionals in to talk and raise awareness on autism, mental health, ADHD, neurodivergent conditions, then it would really create an impact. It would create safe spaces where these things can be discussed. And essentially, that's what I do. And that's why I do what I do, like I say. So if anybody's a church leader here who wants to raise a bit more awareness in the community, happy for you to contact me, happy to come and talk. But essentially, there's a huge role that you guys play in the lives of the Africans in the diaspora. You wouldn't believe it, honestly. But aside that, you guys are doing a great job. So in the absence of any hands up, I'm going to answer the last. I've got quite a few here in my chat. I think people have just been quite shy. I'm going to just skim through and try to get my last 2. So this says, how can siblings and extended families be involved in a constructive way to support? Again, this is a fantastic question, because when somebody's diagnosed with autism, or if the question is being asked, like I said, it can cause a lot of stigma in the community, and a lot of people can become quite saddened by it, actually. So how do we open up communication? How do we support as an extended family? And I think open communication is very important. Okay, explaining autism to siblings, to mothers and fathers, to family, community, aunties, whoever's involved in the person's care, explaining what autism is, and just maybe getting them involved in whatever it is that you're doing to support. So if it's, for example, if it's a sibling, so if you've got twins and you've got like 2 twins, one's got autism, the other doesn't have autism, how can you help one understand? And maybe they're both, let's say, 13 years old. You just got to explain to the twin, or the younger brother, or the older brother, whatever it is, that your brother has got a condition, or your sister's got a condition, but the mind works a little bit differently to us, and that's okay. It's not anything to be ashamed of, but essentially be a little bit careful when you're speaking with them in terms of how you talk to them, how you approach them. Just give them that same conversation we've had today, about bring it down to whatever level they will understand. And then just get them to play together, really, in a way that don't ever force anything. If one twin really wants to play and the other just doesn't want to play at all, don't force it. It can be quite distressing, but again, these are stuff that the pediatrics team and the health visitor team can almost take you through in a profession that I can't go through all today, because it's a lot to go through. But there's definitely support out there for families. So if it's a way where you've got twins, like the question is asking, and one has been diagnosed with autism and the other hasn't, and the other just doesn't understand why their little brother or their little sister doesn't want to play with them, health visitors can be very, very good at this and explaining this. So I'll say approach your health visitor, they'll be able to help you. And my very last question, unless somebody on the floor wants to ask a question, I can take any questions from the floor. I'd like to hear somebody talk, please, because I feel like I've heard my voice for too long. So if anybody has a question at all. Okay.
Yeah, of course. I just wanted to ask a question. Yeah.
Hello, Daniel. Thanks for asking.
We normally hear say a myth, or say a religion, or say a faith, or say obi etima care obi. Is that possible? Have you ever come in contact with a story where na obi yesana obi for whatever reason wetima care before?
Yeah. Thank you. I've just seen say you wrote it in the chat as well. Sorry, I missed that. Yeah. But thanks for coming on to ask as well, Daniel. Unfortunately, as I said, it's not that's why we can't really call it a medical condition. You can't be cured from autism because it's the way that the brain is wired, is the way that you're built, right? So if somebody has autism, it's not something that they pick up like diabetes or high blood pressure. It's like almost like saying, oh, can you cure somebody of black skin, or can you cure somebody of being, it's genetically tied into, that's how their brain was manufactured. You can help with some of the symptoms. So for example, if somebody is born with bow-legged, or if somebody is born with like short arms or something, you can't physically take that thing away from them, but you can help support them. So you can almost do surgeries to try and help straighten the legs, or, try to put prosthesis on the hands, things like that. I'll say it's the same way with autism. That's where the speech therapy comes in. So if somebody's got autism and they've got a speech delay, you will send them to speech therapists to try and get them to catch up. And that often works. They do end up being very good with speech. So you can sort of cure the little symptoms that they have, but can you cure the autism? No. And like I said, autism is not just one symptom, it's a bunch of things. So they might have speech delay, they might have the social interaction thing, they might have the hand flapping thing. You might be able to cure the speech delay, but you might never cure the hand flapping thing. Even as adults, whenever they get in trouble or they get flustered, you might just see them going like this. And to you might say that's an odd behavior for an adult at the age of 50 to start doing this whenever they are upset, but that's just how their brain is wired. That's how they deal with it. So thank you for asking that question. But I guess
so autism basically is more than speech impairment, and I say okay. So
100%. It's much more to it, and I think maybe you missed the beginning of where all the symptoms and signs that I spoke about. But I said so you can have speech delay and not have autism, and you can have autism and not have speech delay. They're totally independent of each other, but you can also have both. So I'll repeat this because a lot of people maybe were not here when I said this initially, but a lot of African children, especially ones that speak their language at home, bilingual ones, whatever language you're speaking at home, even Polish, Indian, Asians, those children in school and nursery will be flagged as having a speech problem. Okay. It is evidence to say that whenever children are learning more than one language at home, especially at the nursery level, they will always be flagged because they don't understand English to the level of, if somebody is learning one language and you are learning two, like me, my son, what I call frafra, he will say, fatuo, baby. And, or he will say things like he will mix the English with the tree. He's very good at tree. I say, honestly, but in English, his teachers always have an issue with him and try to flag him up as having a speech delay.
Yeah.
Having known it, I said to them, I don't think he has a speech delay. He's a bilingual child, so he's going to have, but they'll always flag it. So, yeah. So it's, again, speech delay.
It happens very often in other parts actually in Germany, Italy, where the parents are not fluent in the language. Yeah. In UK, it seems every Ghanaian speak English, so it's more easier for the kids to even adapt to the English than the other parts. So parents are not fluent in let's say Italian, right? So the kids will not catch up fast, and the key, they are also not. When they are busy, they don't really talk to their kids, right? So both languages is not that clear, right? So in that case, anytime they go to school, the teachers always flag that out and talks about it and stuff like that. But in their, like you said, in their nursery period, when they get to the class 1, class 2, they come over it and they are very smart and
Very okay. Yeah. And this is why I always say, if it's a true speech delay problem, and it's an isolated speech delay problem, nothing to be worried about. I get a lot of African parents calling me and saying, my child has been flagged with speech delay. And I say, ignore it, forget it. If it's, don't worry about it. If it's speech delay with other signs and symptoms, like I was saying, then we start worrying that they might have something like autism. Okay, so they have the social interaction, they have the hand flapping, they have all the other symptoms. They will say, okay. But whenever you're flagged for speech delay, the speech and language therapist will assess the child. And if they think it's a problem, they will refer on. So there's nothing wrong with, do you know what I mean? But most of the time they get discharged and say, well, it's a bilingual child. What do you expect?
Yeah.
So I wouldn't worry about that. But I think I'll do a session on speech delay because I think it's a really a lot of parents
it's actually opposite, right? Where a friend of mine, I think the wife is a teacher, right? And a teacher, and she actually told me that because I had my cousin's daughter that had such issues, so she got flagged out and they were worried, right? So I spoke with the lady, and the lady actually told me that even those kids with a delay speech, whatever, they grow up to become the best in class, and eventually it happened the same way. The girl, within a short period, she was the best in class, and it was surprising.
So but as I say, a lot of parents do worry, so I will come back and talk about delay at some point. And thank you, Daniel. That has brought me to the end of my chat. So I would just round up and say, as I said before, autism it's not a disease. It's a condition where people's brains are just built differently and wired differently. You can have very high functioning people with autism who don't need any support at all. And then you can have people who need a lot of support and may even go into sort of learning disability type support that they need. So it's a huge spectrum, is A to Z, and your child can be at either A or Z or somewhere in the middle. They can be at C, B, E, G, whatever, the most important thing is to recognize the signs early, to keep a diary of anything that you think might not be normal, and then to seek help from a health professional early, because if you seek help and it's not autism, nothing lost. But if you don't seek help and it is autism, then it can really, really have a lasting effect on that child and the way the child perceives the world. Okay, so that's just my closing remarks. Thank you all so much for coming to my TED Talks. I'll now leave you with Daniel, who will basically do the focus session on Taptap. Thank you so much for coming.
With Doctor, last one. Children with epilepsy seems to have same symptoms, right? Last question. Somebody just asked.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. When you say same symptom, I spoke about quite a few symptoms, and patients with epilepsy will not have some. And again, there are different types of epilepsy, right? So, I mean, seizures, there are different types of seizures. Epilepsy in its own is a different one, but there's absent seizures where basically you could be talking to somebody, and I've done a session on seizures. You guys should come to the OT Health Talk Show on Wednesdays because I do all my health sessions there. But I've had a session on that, and if you've missed it, you can go back and watch it on the YouTube on OT Media TV. But essentially, absent seizures are when you can be talking to somebody like I'm talking to you right now, and then the person will just freeze, look. Spiritual, and then we'll be taking them to church and stuff. Their medications for epilepsy can be again, it probably can't be fully cured, but it can be managed with medication. So that's a different topic altogether.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks.
I think you got answered. All right, thank you very much, Doctor. Miss Opa, I think it's been some time now.
It's been a while. Thank you for having me.
Yes, I'm ready.
No problem. I'm more than happy to come back.
Thank you very much. I think any panel numbers and so I'll drop it. At this point, say one need to abusian come on a drew soon see if obi or question be ana obitim dia ba near discuss it.